In 2014, 3,300 feet below the surface of the Gulf of Mexico, a remote submarine named Hercules crested a muddy ridge and stopped. Its lights hit something that made no sense. There was a lake down there, not a trench, not a pool of mud, an actual lake with its own shoreline sitting inside the ocean, fed by a slow waterfall spilling over a wall of rock. The crew was staring at water inside water. That lake is the least strange thing you're about to hear about, because the deeper you go, the more the ocean stops behaving like one substance and starts breaking its own rules. Rules about gravity, about sound, about how big a living thing is allowed to get. We're counting up through 4 of them, from odd to genuinely impossible. And the last one doesn't just bend the laws of the ocean. It might explain how life survives on other worlds entirely. Number 4. A lake that kills everything it touches. Scientists call it the Jacuzzi of Despair. It formed 140 million years ago, when an ancient sea evaporated and packed the seafloor with salt. When the ocean came back, it dissolved that salt into something almost twice as dense as normal seawater, laced with methane and hydrogen sulfide and too heavy to mix. So it just sits there in its own basin with real ripples on its real surface. Crabs wander in expecting ocean and get poison instead, dying instantly and never rotting. Pickled forever along the shoreline, and just inches away on the outer wall, mussels and bacteria feast on the same methane that kills everything a few feet over. Imagine pouring thick syrup into a bathtub of water. It doesn't mix, it just pools at the bottom, its own private ecosystem with a death line drawn in salt. That's a lake with a shoreline. Number 3 is a wave you could never see, big enough to move the Earth's climate. For decades, oceanographers had a hole in their math. Keeping the ocean mixed, cycling heat and nutrients from the depths to the surface takes about 2 terawatts of energy. Wind only accounted for half of that. The other terawatt was just missing. Then, satellites picked up something strange. Sea level rippling by mere millimeters, tracing the outline of waves rolling far below the surface between layers of water that don't want to mix, like oil sitting on vinegar. When deep tides slam into ridges like the Luzon Strait, they shove heavy water upward and gravity snaps it back down. Except down here, gravity is so gently balanced between layers that the wave can grow hundreds of feet tall while crawling along slower than you can walk. The surface never even notices. These waves eventually crash into underwater mountains and shatter, and that shattering is the missing terawatt, the actual engine keeping the whole ocean from turning into a stagnant, lifeless column of water. An invisible wave taller than a building is quietly running the planet's thermostat. Number 2 breaks something even bigger: distance itself. In 1991, a scientist named Walter Munk needed a way to measure if the ocean was warming without waiting decades for thermometers to prove it. He knew something odd about sound in seawater. Near the surface, cold water slows it down, but pressure in the depths speeds it back up, and at around 1,000 meters, those 2 forces cancel out perfectly. That creates a channel, a lane of water that keeps trapping sound and bouncing it back toward the center forever. The way bumpers keep a bowling ball from ever reaching the gutter. So Monk's team lowered speakers into that channel near a remote island and fired a single sound. 3.5 hours later, listening stations on the opposite side of the planet, 18,000 kilometers away, heard it arrive. This channel is so reliable that during World War II, downed pilots carried devices built to sink to that exact depth and detonate, so rescuers thousands of miles away could time the boom and find them. Sound doesn't die down there. It just keeps going. A whisper that crosses oceans is strange, but number 1 is the one that shouldn't be possible at all. 7,000 meters down in the Kermadec Trench, baited traps came back swarmed with amphipods, the same tiny scavengers that are normally the size of a grain of rice, except these were the size of a bowling pin. At that depth, water pressure is so extreme it should be crushing the proteins inside every cell, forcing them to unravel like overheated plastic. And yet, these creatures don't just survive it, they grow to be giants. The answer is a molecule called TMAO, a chemical chaperone that packs itself into the empty spaces around proteins like resin poured into brickwork, holding the structure together against pressure that would otherwise dissolve it. There's a hard ceiling to this trick though. Past roughly 8,200 meters, a fish would need so much TMAO just to survive that its own cells would become saltier than the ocean around them, and water would rush in and burst them from the inside. That's the exact depth where fish simply stop existing, not because nothing tries, because biology itself runs out of road. And this is where the meaning gets bigger than the ocean. Some of our solar system's icy moons, places like Europa and Enceladus, are thought to hide oceans of their own, crushed under ice, dark and hypersaline, not unlike the trench that grows bowling pin-sized amphipods right here on Earth. If life on our planet can not only survive those exact conditions, but thrive in them, using molecules like TMAO to hold itself together, then the question isn't really about the deep sea anymore. So if our own ocean is already this alien, 3 miles down, what do you think is quietly surviving in the oceans we haven't even reached yet?